welcome everybody to Grimwit with Dimwits. I'm very excited today because this is the first episode of our Oxspookterfest month. We've really, I say we, but it's really me, been looking forward to this because we're hoping that our episodes are going to chill you and thrill you. So get ready for a little extra spooky and gore. She hates me right now.
Hi, everybody. I'm Blondie.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And I'm T. I got all excited.
She got overly excited once again. Like she said, we wasn't synonymous with this. The whole, I can't even say it, so I'm not even going to try.
Oxspookterfest
is all her. And let me start off by saying right at the get-go, I am so sorry.
I love this time of year, and I am shocked that word was not ever used before. I think it's ours, right? We looked it up.
No, you looked it up and got so excited. Nobody's used this. There's a reason. There is a reason, lady.
You know, I just know everybody's going, damn, that's a good word. I wish I would have thought about it.
No. Maybe in your dreams, but no.
Anyway, don't rain on my black cloud parade.
Heaven forbid I poo-poo on your parade. Nothing like raining niblets. I know. Okay. So, niblets. Oh my goodness. So this episode takes place in Chicago in the 1980s. I've always wanted to go to Chicago. I've never been. I take that back. I never really wanted to go to Chicago. I'm sure it's lovely.
It's very pretty. I liked it.
So Chicago in the 60s, there was civil rights marches led by Martin Luther King and the 1968 riots. In the 70s, there were Vietnam War protests and rebuilding from the riots. To say Chicago in the 80s had an edge to it would be an understatement. Rent was low. There were taverns all over every few blocks or so. They had plenty of clubs with rooms with live music. It was a great place to be in your 20s. Although Chicago was also dirtier and much rougher. Even though it was rougher, it was still a time where you could walk down the street anytime, day or night, and feel safe. That was until the police received a call to the Brer Rabbit Motel about 25 miles outside of Chicago on June 1st, 1981. An employee had told the manager of a bad smell somewhere around the motel. The manager went looking and found a dead body.
Doesn't a bad smell always mean there's a dead body?
No, actually the manager thought maybe a animal or something because it was right against the highway. It ran right next to the highway.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so that's what he actually thought it was. When the police arrived, they find a woman face down with her hands handcuffed behind her back, underwear pulled down, and money in her sock. Upon first look, it appeared the body had been dead for a couple weeks due to the decay and amount of maggots on her body. She had been stabbed, mutilated, and her left breast had been removed.
Ooh.
Through dental records and fingerprints, the body is identified as Linda Sutton, 26-year-old mother of two, abducted on May 23, 1981. After the autopsy, it was discovered she had been dead for a few days. Due to the mutilation and the wounds, insects find the path of least resistance to enter the body, which sped up the decaying process.
That makes sense.
The money in her sock was an indicator that she was a working girl. That was a place where they kept their money. Based on the fact she could be a prostitute, Chicago PD was notified. So Chicago PD investigators had very little evidence or clues as to who the murderer is, and generally crimes against prostitutes are hard to investigate since when they do disappear, usually no one reports it and the case goes cold.
I'm going to assume it's probably obvious to a lot of people that as a prostitute, they're in and out of the streets. I'm sure they come in, need to make some money, and hopefully they get out and off of the streets, which is what I assume happens when they go missing most of the time, but not in this case.
I don't know the percentages, but
right.
I guess one can always hope that there is a large percentage that does make it off the streets.
They're on the streets just to make the money, get by, maybe if they're on drugs or whatever. And then once they get through that, hopefully they get through that, then they get off the streets. So I say all this to understand, why nobody would report it. And probably the police are used to that and just really don't look into it much.
I think that's the case. And a lot of the times the prostitutes or sex workers end up being teens or runaways.
Right. And they end up going back home or
right.
whatever the case might be.
Yeah. Over the next few months, there are several other victims found in Chicago with signs of mutilation similar to Linda Sutton, tortured, raped, and mutilated. On February 12th, 1982, driving down the road, a 35-year-old cocktail waitress ran out of gas. She was possibly looking to get help from someone and got abducted. Her keys were still in the ignition and her purse was still on the front seat. That was one thing they were saying, that robbery was never a motive. Searching the area, they found her nude body on an embankment. She was sexually assaulted, mutilated, and her breast had been amputated.
When you say they were mutilated, what was that?
They were stabbed, their breasts had been removed, or at least one of them had been removed.
So that was the thing that they had in common, their breasts being removed.
Correct.
Okay, wow,
Correct.
That's horrifying.
Quote, "They were evil crimes made even more frightening by the range of victims. Every woman in the Chicagoland area was at risk because it wouldn't matter who you were, what you looked like. It wouldn't make any difference what your age was, what your race was. You were all at risk." End quote. State Senator John Milner, former detective commander, Elmhurst PD.
Just from his quote, it sounds like this got really, really ugly.
Very fast. Lawrence Troca, detective, Cook County, said, quote, "By the time these women were found, they were so badly decomposed that one could not tell what the cause of death was."
Wow.
So about a year later, on May 15th, 1982, employees of an Elmhurst real estate office got to the office to find it locked. Dependable 21-year-old Lorraine Laurie Ann Borowski, who usually opens the office in the morning, is nowhere to be found. One of the employees looks around to find keys, makeup, and shoes in the parking lot. State Senator John Milner said, quote, "What looked like she was literally taken off the street. That's an aberration. These things just don't happen in Elmhurst. So we started to investigate that immediately." End quote. Once her parents were notified, they went looking, starting at her apartment. Her mother said, quote, "Everything was as neat as a pin," end quote. They just couldn't comprehend Lori missing or just gone. They continued looking, talking to anyone that knew or may know Lori, and passed out flyers with no result. Her mother, this was really sad, her mother carried a white sheet in her car, and she said with tears, just in case they found her, she wanted to cover her up.
So her mom was prepared to come across like a dead body.
She was.
I mean, that's what she's saying with a white sheet. Like, I'll see her the way she is, and I'll be the person that covers her. That is that's such strength,
I think in her head, she thought she didn't want to find her in a compromising position. She just wanted her to have that dignity.
That dignity, right. No, I get it. But boy, I tell you, I don't know as a mom that I would think about the white sheet. But the fact that she did, it's almost like she prepared herself to find a body.
To find the worst.
Yeah, to find the worst.
Yeah.
Exactly. Wow. Brave lady.
The Elmhurst PD received tips about her disappearance, including one about a red van in the parking lot, but unfortunately it led nowhere, and eventually the tips stopped coming, and the case just stalls.
And they got the tip about the red van where this girl was supposed to be?
They remember it in the parking lot of where she worked.
Okay. So obviously a vehicle that wasn't supposed to be there.
Right. Shui Muck, 30 years old, worked full-time at a plant that made lights. After she worked at the plant, then she'd go to her family's business, which was a restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
and she would work there, pull another shift. One night on May 29th, 1982, at 1:30, her and her brother were driving home. She gets in a heated argument with her brother. They come to a stop sign. And I don't know if the brother asked her to get out or if she volunteered to get out, but she got out of the car.
Never a good idea.
No. And she is thinking that because her entire family left, that somebody's going to come up from behind and pick her up.
Right.
But unfortunately, they didn't, and that wasn't the case. She disappeared. Her body was found 4 months later.
Oh, my goodness.
On September 30th, buried at a construction site. Now, it was found next to an anthill, and detectives said there was nothing left because of the being next to the anthill.
Oh.
There was nothing left of her,
Mm-hmm.
but the back of her skull was shattered. They figured that somebody punched her in the face because her tooth was chipped.
Mm-hmm.
She fell back, caused the back of her skull to shatter. That was a suspected cause of death. They also found bits of steel wire by her body. During a confession, they said because she had small breasts and they couldn't be removed, they just slashed them, but then had sex with the slash marks.
Okay, who's they?
We'll get to that.
Okay, all right.
I just wanted to interject that in there so that you would know who I was talking about.
So somebody confessed that she had small breasts, so they didn't...
They couldn't remove her breasts. So
like they did with the other people.
Yes,
Got you.
yes,
Got
yes.
you. Okay, wow.
It's tough. On June 13th, 1982, on Chicago's North Side, Angel York, 23, a local prostitute, went missing. She got into a van, thinking it was a John, but she was forced to cut the side of her breast, and he made the hole larger with the knife and his fingers so he could have sex with the hole. She was handcuffed, raped, and tortured. He placed duct tape on the side of her breast and dumped her. She survived. At the hospital, she told detectives about the van she was picked up in.
Where'd the duct tape come from and trying to seal the wound? It didn't seem like they were worried about trying to make sure the women lived before this one.
Fortunately, they weren't consistent to some level.
Very odd.
It
It's
is
a very
very-
odd thing to do.
It's very
I
odd.
mean, the attack itself was so disturbing, but this duct tape is so different than everybody else.
And they let her survive.
And they
so-
let her survive where she could identify them. So
Right. On August 28th, 1982, Sandra Delaware, 18, was attacked. Her wrists were tied with a shoelace. She was mutilated, raped, and stabbed. She was missing one breast and was killed by strangulation with her bra. They found her under the Fullerton Bridge by the Chicago River.
wow. And she was 18 years old.
She was 18. That was the teens we were talking about.
Oh my gosh, just a baby.
So it continues. Rose Beck Davis, 30, who is a marketing executive, was found in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood. She had been raped, stabbed, and strangled on September 8, 1982. Her face had been disfigured with a hatchet. She had wounds on her stomach. She still had her breasts, but they had been slashed and cut at. The attacker also rammed the handle of the hatchet into her vagina.
Oh my gosh.
They know this because the coroner would find pieces of wood inside during the autopsy.
Oh my gosh.
It's terrible.
That is nightmarish. This poor lady.
J. Slade Fletcher, former PIO Chicago PD, author of Deadly Thrills, stated, quote, "These were horrendous crime scenes. These women were hacked with axes. Several of them were beaten. Their faces were beaten desperately, terribly, but in every case, every single one of them, their breasts had been slashed, and this is no surgical type procedure. And in most cases, it was not post-mortem. The women were still alive," end quote.
I wonder what this breast obsession is.
We'll get into that.
Okay. All right. I know it's like this is very odd and unusual.
Among other things.
Very sick, it sounds like.
Then in a random situation on October 6, 1982, there were two men, Rafael Tirado, 28, a local drug dealer, and Roberto Rosario, 18, were standing by a phone booth in Chicago when bullets came flying at him. Raphael was killed, but Roberto survived. They were targeted by what later came to be known as the Chicago Ripper Crew. Joel Goldstein, Assistant State Attorney, Cook County, explains, quote, "The name Chicago Ripper was a media creation, was, I guess, derived from the fact that it was mutilations and murders of prostitutes, at least in part, and that was a similarity to Jack the Ripper in London," end quote.
Oh, so the Ripper Crew is for Jack the Ripper. They're trying to mimic him mutilating prostitutes.
Right.
Got it.
And I think because of all the murders that were going on, it was apparent that it wasn't just one man, though, because of the variety of the crimes and what actually was done to these women.
I wonder how they pulled this executive lady in there, though. She wasn't a prostitute.
No, and it
must have just been an opportunity.
They said earlier, the quote was, I'm trying to think, Milner, I think, had said that it didn't matter who you were.
Right. What you look like, what your age was. Okay.
Right.
Wow.
So there was no specific MO for this at all.
Which is frightening. At least when there's an MO, they kind of know, who to look for and what they're looking for.
Right.
But this is almost like with Richard Ramirez. You've got no pattern here.
No, none whatsoever.
Crazy.
16 months after Linda Sutton was found, there are still no suspects and no clear MOs, like we talked about, of the killings. Since the murders happened in the suburbs of Chicago, they are also unsure if they are connected. Because the Chicago PD has some, the other ones are in the suburbs, so they're really not kind of connecting the dots yet.
They're covering a big area, it sounds like.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
One evening, the police get a call that a Chicago prostitute was attacked and left for dead near some railroad tracks. Once the police arrived, they find her alive but badly mutilated, and her left breast was removed. She was taken to the hospital. She was in critical condition. Her name is Beverly Washington, 20. Police were hoping that she could give them some clues of who did this to her, give them anything for any of the suspects.
Right, they finally got a witness.
Beverly was abducted, handcuffed. She was forced to give the man that abducted her oral sex. He then threatened her that if she didn't take these handful of pills, he would kill her. From there, he took what she thought was a piano wire, wrapped it around her breast, and kept tightening it and pulling it till she passed out. Next thing she knows, she wakes up in the hospital. The police go to talk to her. She cannot talk, but she ends up writing on a piece of paper that she was taken in a red van with a wood panel situation behind the driver's seats and a roach clip, which was where the rearview mirror was, with a white and blue feather hanging from it.
Okay, that's pretty specific.
Right. She also described the man that attacked her, a slender man around the age of 25. He had a mustache and greasy brown hair. Police put out an APB on the red van in the hopes of possibly finding Lori Borowski, who is still missing. The real estate lady.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's still missing. 5 days after the abduction of Beverly Washington, Lori Borowski's body was found in a Clarendon Hills cemetery. She was raped, mutilated, and had 80 stab wounds, and her breast was removed. She was killed with a hatchet.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, one of the interviews with her mom, she had said that they went to this cemetery. As they're searching, she was about 10 feet from where her daughter's body was. It broke her heart that she was that close. After this is when the police had put the connection together with all the other murders that had been happening in the Chicago area.
Okay.
They knew the similar victims were in Chicago's surrounding areas, and they had determined that the injuries inflicted on the women in Chicago were similar to the ones in the suburbs of Chicago.
Well, I would think just removing the breast would be a major connection. You don't hear about that very often.
But then you realize, too, this is the 80s, and I'm sure they do have some kind of inner circle of police, but 25 miles out one way, so far out.
So you're saying like maybe they didn't even know about the breasts being removed. So lack of
Exactly.
communication.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we didn't have what we have now back then.
Exactly. Catherine Ramsland stated, quote, "With this perpetrator, there just didn't seem to be a clear type that he liked, so you could be a prostitute, working woman, just a girl out to the movies day or night, in the city, in the suburbs. You were a victim of opportunity, so these girls would have no chance with him moving in. If he spotted you, it was over," end quote.
Wow.
Out on patrol on October 20th, 1982, 2 detectives had spotted the old van with tinted windows and the roach clip with the blue and white feathers hanging from the rear view. Seeing the van is a complete surprise to the detectives, and they said, "When does this ever happen?"
Right. Just
Really.
pulled up in front of them.
When did this ever happen? They pulled it over, and the driver was Edward Spritzer, 21. He explains to the officer that the van isn't his, it belongs to his boss, Robin Gecht. Now, a little background on Robin Gecht. He's 29, raised by his grandparents. After he got older, he got a job, and he was working at PDM Contractors, which just so happened to be owned by John Wayne Gacy.
Oh my gosh.
The connections.
That is insane.
I agree. At 22, Robin marries Rosemary, and they have 2 children, and he started his own construction company. Gecht was horrible to his wife. He demanded things like he stick pins into her breasts.
Oh my gosh.
Also known for sleeping with different women. An ex-girlfriend even went to the police station to tell detectives that Gecht wanted her to cut off her own nipples.
What the heck? And this guy's married and this wife is tolerating these requests?
Well, they get afraid.
I'd be more afraid of sticking needles in my boobs. That's disgusting.
The police go to Robin Gecht's home to see if he matches the description given by Beverly Washington. So with the description and the van match, Gecht is brought in for questioning. They decide to do a lineup with Gecht to see if Beverly recognizes him, and she's just terrified. Without question, she points at him. Gecht is extremely collected, calm, and cool, and he denies everything about the attack on Beverly Washington.
Mm-hmm.
But after the lineup confirmation, Gecht is booked on several charges, including aggravated battery and deviant sexual assault. A few days later, another Chicago prostitute comes forward and claims that Gecht attacked her as well. He took her to the red van, cut off her breast before dumping her out.
He just cuts her breast off and dumps her out of the van?
Yep. And that one I was curious about. Why didn't she go to the police sooner?
Yeah.
Unless she was just terrified.
And why did he even dump her out and injure her? I mean, doesn't he know he's going to get caught? He's not even a very good criminal at this point.
He just thinks that nobody can touch him.
They're invincible.
Yes.
They're invincible.
So now with Gecht behind bars, they go and focus on his employee, Edward Spritzer.
Mm-hmm.
Spritzer was brought to the police station. He was very scared, very jumpy. But after questioning him, they break him down and he tells detectives stories, giving them gruesome details about what happened to these women.
Oh, so he's admitting to being involved.
He is. They would abduct the girls, beat them, rape them, and Gecht would remove the victims' breasts and have sex with the open wounds on their chest before killing them.
Oh my gosh.
Spritzer also confesses to the killing of Rafael Tirado and the wounding of Roberto Rosario. He said that Spritzer and Gecht had been driving around hunting. When Gecht saw them by the phone booth, he tells Spritzer to stop the car. He goes to the trunk, pulls out a gun, and just basically kills them.
Well, he only killed one, though, right?
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. He killed one and he wounded
the other one survived.
Roberto. Yes.
Wow.
Some of the details Spritzer included about the women the police didn't even know about, including a sex worker that had her breasts removed and another one that they had shot in the head, put chains around her body, then weighed her down with bowling balls and dumped her into the water.
Oh my gosh.
It was awful. In all of this questioning, his statement turned out to be 78 pages, and he talks for hours of all the details, telling them about how Gecht tortured women and about his obsession with breasts. Gecht actually said that he loved large breasts. There's nothing wrong with that.
I hope I'm not jumping ahead, but at any point, did this kid say why they did it?
Honestly, not that I can recall. Other than the fact that, and I'll get into it later, but he was petrified of Gecht.
Well, I could see why.
Yeah.
So Gecht, who used to work for John Wayne Gacy, sounds like maybe he kind of became his John Wayne Gacy.
Exactly. Catherine Ramsland is familiar with this kind of body mutilation, states, quote, "There are 3 reasons why someone might remove a body part. One is its paraphilia, which is a deviant sexual practice that someone gets aroused by unusual objects or activities. The other can be symbolic in that they're removing a body part that's representative of a female, for example, in order to then do something with it that will empower them. And the third one would be as a memento or souvenir from the murder," end quote. So there's actually a term for it.
Oh my gosh, what is wrong with people? Who wants a souvenir like that?
Buckle up, sister.
Oh my gosh, okay,
Buckle up.
Here we go.
So Gecht had a strong interest in Satanism. The men would meet in Gecht's attic for Black Mass, kneeling at an altar while Gecht would perform rituals, chanting to give it that satanic significance and believing they could summon the Dark One. Doing all of this before they would masturbate into the breast of a woman that they had attacked. Then they would cut it up and consume it as like the body of Christ for some kind of empowerment or magical properties.
Okay, wait a minute. Did I hear you right? They all masturbate into this
They would
shell of a breast, I'm assuming, and then they eat it?
Yes. I told you.
Oh my.
It gets worse. They would actually take them as souvenirs, like the professor had said about the variety of reasons why someone would do.
Right, and that
Yeah.
one would be for souvenirs of the. Oh my god!
She didn't say anything about eating them, but that's what they would do.
But they're also spewing in them first. That's a lot.
When you do what you've been doing, do you really think that's
It's
too much?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Afraid of Gecht, Spreitzer stated that Gecht didn't kill anyone and blamed Andrew Kokoralis, who is 19 years old. Andrew is brought to the police station and he begins to implicate himself in 18 murders, including the murder of Rose Beck Davis and Lori Borowski.
Mm.
He describes what they did by snatching women off the streets, sexually assaulting them, and stabbing them. Andrew further explains the variety of weapons they would use to remove women's breasts, anything that they could get, but most notably was the piano wire. This would sexually excite them. He follows this up by saying they would have sex in the stab wounds.
So if they're, I can't even believe I'm going to ask about this. If they're removing breasts with a piano wire, how and why are they stabbing them as well? Because I'm assuming the piano wire is cutting the breast off clean.
They wrap it around the bottom and squeeze it.
So then where does the stabbing come in?
They just start stabbing anywhere.
Oh, so it's not just the breast.
Yeah, no, they just...
And then they have sex with the stab wounds. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm acting like I understand this. I don't, but I'm trying to understand and follow their depravity. It's pretty...
Don't.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting lost here. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. Less than 48 hours after Andrew's arrest, detectives go and see Andrew's brother, Thomas Kokoralis, 21. Now, Thomas is borderline range of intelligence. He has an IQ of 75.
Okay.
So as he's being interviewed, he gets nervous and fidgety. He ends up implicating himself, saying that Edward Spreitzer, his brother, and himself abducted Lori Borowski, beat her, removed her left breast, which that's what actually did happen.
Mm-hmm.
Then they had sex with a wound.
So they proved that they actually did it by providing the details.
Thomas.
Oh, my goodness.
Then they ended up killing her with an axe before dumping her in the cemetery.
And she's the one they said was killed with a hatchet, right? So that's all correct.
She was killed with an axe. There was another one killed with a hatchet.
Oh, okay. All right.
Thomas corroborated the statements about the ceremonies and said he participated in more than a dozen of these satanic rituals. Also stating that it was Robin Gecht's idea to remove the breasts and that he had special powers and a supernatural connection. See, this goes back to they're afraid of this guy.
Yeah.
Thomas ended up pleading guilty to the murder of Lori Borowski. So them being terrified of Gecht, they even felt that he could get them from behind bars because he had these special powers.
So they were pretty much willing to do anything
They
he
were
wanted
willing
them to.
to
They
do
were
anything.
that scared.
The three of them wouldn't testify against Gecht, so as a result, they didn't have confirmation that Gecht did any of these murders, so he was not charged with murder.
That's horrendous.
Andrew Kokorales was convicted of murder, aggravated kidnapping, and rape in the death of Rose Beck Davis. He was given life in prison without parole. 2 years later, Andrew was convicted for his part in the death of Lori Borowski and sentenced to death. He was executed by lethal injection on March 17, 1999.
So given life for one murder and then given the death sentence for another.
Right.
This was a kid. This is sad. I mean, I know he's a monster, but
he was 19.
Yeah, this is truly sad.
I think when he died, I think he was 35. But I mean, after that, what kind of life do you have in jail? Just sitting there waiting to die.
I can't even imagine what Robin Gecht did to, there's 3 other boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did to 3 boys to make them so scared of him. Like, what was that story about? Or maybe they just witnessed him doing all these other things to everybody else. I don't know.
Could be.
But to be that scared, there's something going on there.
Yeah, they were petrified.
Yeah.
As of January 2000, there had been 13 men that had been placed on the list of people that should not have been on death row. So Governor Ryan placed a moratorium on all executions in the state. Andrew Kokorales was the last man executed before the moratorium.
Well,
that was another thing, too. He was considering it before Andrew Kokorales was supposed to be executed, but he held off until then, till after.
I feel sorry for this kid, Andrew Kokorales, but if death is what he was supposed to get, then I'm glad he was executed.
He confessed to killing 18 women.
Yeah.
So he deserved to be on there.
He sure did.
Yes. But the governor definitely wanted to make sure that he got his punishment before he placed this moratorium.
Right.
In 1984, Andrew Spreitzer pled guilty and was given life without parole. This was for the murders of Shui Wack, Rose Beck Davis, Sandra Delaware, and Raphael Tirado in 1982, along with the charges of attempted murder, aggravated kidnapping, deviant sexual assault, and rape. A couple years later, he was convicted of murder, aggravated kidnapping in the death of Linda Sutton. The prosecutor sought the death penalty, and ultimately Spreitzer was sentenced to death. However, his sentence was commuted to life in prison in 2003 by Governor Ryan. Governor Ryan also commuted the sentences of all death row inmates.
So he made the group that isn't going to get executed, and the other kid did not.
That's why he held off, so that at least one of them, I think, because he was closest, my assumption.
He should have done them all. This is horrendous.
Yeah, I know. Thomas Kokorales was convicted of torture and murder of Lori Borowski. Thomas actually helped detectives build the case of the crimes that were committed. Because of this, he was given life in prison instead of the death penalty. He appealed his conviction, and in his new trial, he pled guilty to the murder and was given 70 years, and the other charges were dismissed as part of his plea agreement. He was supposed to be paroled in 2017, but needed an approved place to live because of his IQ, and he couldn't find a place, so he didn't end up getting paroled until 2019, and he still lives in Illinois today. There were community protests over his release because he technically only served half of his sentence. He only went in for 35 of the 70 years. This raises a lot of questions regarding rehabilitation. Will he kill again? Will he associate himself with, and the list goes on.
Right.
I guess you can just hope for the best at this point. One of Lori's close friends, Liz Soriano, said about Lori, quote, "She was the type of person who could make people laugh very easily. She sensed when someone was having an off day and would gravitate to them. She'd crack jokes and make them smile." End quote.
So sad.
I know. I could use her
jokes right now.
Use her gravitating towards me.
That's my job, and I do a great job, thank you.
Robin Gecht went on trial, but since Gecht refused to speak with the police, he was not tried for the murders. However, in 1983, he was convicted of attempted murder, deviant sexual assault, aggravated kidnapping, and rape for what he did to Beverly Washington. Judge Mahone basically called him a devil and an animal, and that if Beverly didn't survive, he would be charged with murder. Gecht was sentenced to 120 years behind bars and is eligible for parole in 2042 at age 89. Just a thought, he would have served 59 years if he was paroled.
Still doesn't seem long enough. He should be in an electric chair.
A long time ago.
A long time ago. And somebody should cut off his nipples right before that.
Okay.
Hey, eye for an eye.
Exactly. A little side note speculation about Robin Gecht and John Wayne Gacy. Though it was never fully proven, it was once said that Gacy had an accomplice, and that if he did, it would most likely be Gecht.
That makes sense to me.
An interesting note, Gecht had 2 children, a daughter named Jamie and a son named David. In January 1999, David, who was 18, was charged with first-degree murder along with Richard Quill, 19, and Ruben Hernandez, 27, for the shooting of Roberto Cruz in Chicago. Apparently, Cruz was a gang member and was confronted in a bar by 2 men looking for money that they were owed. Cruz said he would handle it later, and the men left. Cruz went outside to leave and was shot several times by his car. Through a series of statements and witnesses on March 23, 2000, the 3 were convicted. David Gecht received a 45-year sentence, Richard Quill received a 30-year sentence, and Ruben Hernandez received a 60-year sentence. David filed appeals, all upholding his conviction until October 2020. The Exoneration Project at the University of Chicago Law School filed a post-conviction petition to vacate his conviction.
Why? This guy's guilty. Why?
Can you let me finish?
Oh, no, sorry.
Since 2011, there have been some cases that defendants were granted new trials or had been exonerated based on evidence that 2 police officers had coerced confessions or forced witnesses to make false statements. Ultimately, on July 18, 2022, Gecht's case was dismissed and he was released. Then on April 13, 2023, Quill's case was dismissed and he was released. As far as Hernandez, I didn't see if his was overturned or dismissed, but as far as I know, he's still in prison for the planning and coordinating the shooting. What I did read about these 2 detectives, they were pretty brutal in getting confessions and getting witness statements, and I didn't want to go into all the details about them, but what they said, it did pretty much sound like that. And it was pretty consistent with these 2 policemen.
So then I feel bad now because now there's a chance they could be innocent. But with the confession, I just assumed they were guilty.
So in this particular instance, from what I read, I'm assuming this is confirmed, but from what I read, he was in the interrogation room for a long period of time, chained to a wall, standing up. He was deprived food, water, sleep. They were beating on him. And
even without the beating, that's one of the tactics.
Yes.
To get them to say
so
what they want.
They coerced a confession out of him.
Wow.
And the witnesses from the bar, there was one witness, a waitress, who said that the men that had gone in to talk to Cruz were 2 huge, like 250-pound men. And David Gecht, I think, weighed like 140 pounds, skinny.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But what a twist. And here I am just making assumptions that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
I did the same thing.
Yeah. Now I feel bad about it.
It is unsure how many women the Chicago Ripper crew actually killed, and we will probably never know. But I'll leave you with a couple of statements. Quote, "There could be fields out there somewhere with some women's bodies in that we will never know about. There was simply no way to. There was not even any way for them to remember all of the women that they had killed. So it absolutely is my belief that there are many more victims out there," sadly stated J. Slade Fletcher. Joel Goldstein, Assistant State Attorney, Cook County, said in disgust, quote, Robin Gecht is still alive, and Eddie Spreitzer is still alive, and all these victims are dead, and their families have suffered their loss, and justice, I thought, meant they would have died, end quote.
Yep. People who went this crazy and mutilated women the way they did for cruelty, for Satanism, whatever it was. I'm sorry. We have no room on this earth for people like that.
I know. I agree with you.
It makes me angry that they're still alive. Wow.
Well, that's the story of the Chicago Ripper Crew.
Well, you started off Oxbookterfest with a bang.
Here we go again.
You know, it's going to be a good month.
Well, I will have to say yes, it will, but it remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Okay. I'm being positive for the both of us.
Thank you, T.
Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for making it through to the end of this pretty gruesome story. Thank you for your time. Have fun, take care, and let your imaginations run wild. We just want to thank you all for sharing your time with us. And if you'd like to send in your creepy little grim bits, we would love to hear your personal stories, interests, and suggestions. Please email them to grimwitwithdimwits@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at grimwitwithdimwits, Twitter at grimwitwithdimwits, and Facebook, Grimwit with Dimwits. Join us every Monday for new episodes, and feel free to share us with your grim-loving friends.
We would really appreciate if you would take a minute to rate and review. 5-star ratings go a long way and would really help us out. Until then, we would love it if you'd come back next week to delve with us into the strange and unusual things we just can't wrap our skulls around.